Gaming as a kid is something that we all tend to look back fondly at. The simplicity of latching onto a game because it's all you had is something I miss deeply now. I love how I could just keep replaying the same level, not really knowing what to do, but still coming out of it thinking it was a fun time. My most cherished gaming memories aren't usually to do with the game itself and how I like this mechanic because it worked well with the rest of the game, but just these insignificant moments that I'll never be able to recreate. I'm sure most of you have never heard of Buzz Jungle Party. It's a pretty unremarkable minigame collection, but playing this with my cousins and laughing at the commentator is what I remember most about this game. So I can look back very fondly at so many of these games and wish I could re-experience this with the games I play today. But I'm older now, and I just don't see games in the same light, which isn't a bad thing at all. In fact, last year I played a game that almost instantly became my favorite game of all time, despite not having the same type of joyous connection I do with these deeply nostalgic games. I enjoyed it because I had a deeper understanding of video games as a whole and could recognize this was something special. In saying that, I thought it'd be fun to see if these games I hold so near and dear to my heart could still connect with me all these years later. It's not like playing these games nowadays is going to erase those memories, it's just so interesting to see how I unpack a game now compared to what I felt as a kid. So I've selected 3 childhood games that I'm going to replay and talk about, the first of those being the classic Simpsons Hit and Run. The Simpsons is such an important show for me. I absolutely adored this growing up, to the point where I wish my dad would be more like Homer Simpson, cause you know, it'd be pretty funny. Throughout my later teen years, I really started to enjoy the show a lot more, and I can confidently say it's one of my favorite shows of all time. Because The Simpsons is such a clever show, so many of its jokes flew over my head as a kid. Nowadays, I've seen pretty much every episode between seasons 1 and 12, and it's an infinitely replayable series because of how many jokes I missed. And that is definitely something new I discovered about this game. I never really appreciated how funny this game is. Sure, it's not a masterpiece of story like the golden years of the show, but its understanding of its world and its characters carry over into the writing, which made this playthrough much better than I thought it would be. I mean, this game is just fun, whether it's characters shouting the dumbest things ever, beating the absolute crap out of whoever you want, or just the wacky physics of the game. I gotta say, this time round, I appreciate the sandbox aspects of these levels. Like, for some reason, as a kid, I was fixated on beating the story, and exclusively that. I didn't expect some of my favorite moments from this recent playthrough to come from exploring the levels. This time round, I tried to complete as many objectives before moving on to the next world. The comic books were mostly well-hidden, fun challenges. Killing the bees is a collectible I actually really enjoyed. It's so satisfying, mostly due to the sounds it produces. The gags were something I actively searched for. Honestly, I'm embarrassed to admit I didn't even know there were bonus missions in this game. That's something stupid kid me just completely ignored. Additionally, I didn't really know about the races. I think I might have accidentally done one of these thinking it was a main mission, but I never saw it as a great set of side missions that the game had to offer. I was really surprised by how much more I got out of this game. I thought I was pretty thorough with this game as a kid, having played it all the time. Having all these extra game modes and secrets in between the main missions made this playthrough way more enjoyable, especially in the first 3 levels. I was hooked to this game. Completing the collectible side of this game is a joy, but completing the main missions of this game isn't as tight as I remember it being. I forgot how much of this game outstayed its welcome. I'm sure this game was rushed, because not only do they keep reusing the same mission types by World 2, but they just cycle through the same worlds you've already explored. The Pooh world is especially similar to its original. So I'd say the game is extremely fun up until the 3rd world. I mean, it's got that licensed game clunkiness to it, and it's pretty simplistic in terms of its mission design, but exploring these worlds is just so much fun for me, which is why the last 4 worlds just don't really do it for me. Re-exploring these worlds is a bit tedious because there's not really any new hiding spots. There's a couple, but not that many. You have to go through every location you've already explored, but again, just to check if something new is there. It's pretty inconsistent with where it hides its collectibles. Sometimes it's in the exact same spot, but sometimes it's not. And this inconsistency assures that you have to check all the same places with the chance of disappointment. So in the end, the last 3 worlds are mostly carried by their missions, and these can get really frustrating, because although you're not experiencing anything you haven't already done, the jankiness and bullshit of this game comes to light when the time limits are so strict. Like, these drivers have been paid off to make your day as miserable as possible. And this got me so frustrated in these later missions that tend to last way longer than needed. To be fair, I'm partially to blame when I choose the worst handling cars possible, but I can't resist playing as the little buggy. Like, I genuinely made it through 90% of this world on this piece of shit. And I don't know why, because it goes against everything else I've been saying, but I love the challenge this provided. It was completely bullshit, but this game still allows you to make your own fun in these final worlds. But the fun is completely halted in the final world. This is where you can tell the game was rushed, as it's really just the exact same finicky mission repeated 3 times. As a kid, I never really got past the 4th world. I can't remember if I gave up on it or if there was a mission that was too hard. So I remember playing the final world when I was like 16 and didn't really struggle with the driving missions too much. The thing that was the greatest obstacle of all time was this goddamn platforming section. If you've made it to this point in the game, there have been a few platforming challenges, but nothing as terrible as this one. As a kid, I couldn't get past this for the life of me. But this time around, it only took like 3 attempts. It's a little finicky, but with all the experiences I've had with 3D platformers, it wasn't a challenge at all this time. In fact, the last world as a whole was nowhere near as challenging as I thought it'd be. Maybe it's because they were really lenient on what counts as a big hit, but I was not driving that well and still managed to get through the last missions with little to no retries. I think one mission that really had me struggling was the laser collection mission in World 6. Driving through this area with people just jumping in front of your car made it impossible to not get hit and run. And then if you slow down to avoid them, usually you just run out of time. But I really enjoyed missions like this. The ones that really push you to learn all the shortcuts, require difficult paths, and have a variety of mission types to keep it interesting. In saying that, not all missions are created equal. A lot of them do feel like easier versions of things before it. But as a whole, I really enjoyed this game. Obviously, I don't have the same attachment to the game where I'd consider it one of the best games I've ever played. But this time around, I was able to appreciate so much more. The worlds created here are a great representation of the show, and this game will hit a lot harder if you have a special connection to the show. Small details popped up to me way more than before, and it was just refreshing to see and hear all these new jokes that feel reminiscent of the golden years of the show. Even without having any knowledge of the show, I would still recommend this game because it's exactly what games should be: chaotic fun. The 2D Mario series is something that I have always relied on for multiplayer experiences. I feel like a lot of the stale level design is ignored when you have friends to mess around with in these levels. Like, it's no secret that in retrospect, these new Super Mario Bros. Games have kind of fallen off in public perception. The series started off pretty refreshing, then quickly became stale. With New Super Mario Bros. Wii, it's not as clear what everyone thinks about it. I definitely liked it as a kid, but I've always held the sentiment that the DS game was much more memorable and special. So much of this game was lost on me to time, so I was really interested to see how playing the game by myself would hold up. Keeping in mind, by now I've experienced the entirety of the new Super Mario Bros. Series, and ultimately what I have to say is, this game is a really mixed bag. For every good original level, there's 2 absolutely shocking levels. And even though this is only the second entry in the franchise, it already borrows so many ideas from the DS game. I will say there are so many things here that I think are great upgrades from the DS game. The controls feel a lot better. Honestly, just adding the twirl makes these levels way easier to traverse. The item houses are so much fun to go to, instead of feeling like a waste of time. The propeller is genuinely the best power-up in the series up until the acorn suit. Even though it can absolutely break the levels, I found myself never really keeping it for more than 3 levels. The world maps, while still pretty basic, are definitely an upgrade. Some world maps really try to spice things up, and I appreciate that, even though most of the time it's more annoying than fun. Something I was pretty surprised with was the abundance of good secrets in this game. I thought like 90% of the star coins were hidden in pipes or hidden walls, but that only makes up a small proportion of the game's secrets. My favorite secrets were the ones that really made you think about how to get it. This level was already one of my favorites in the game, and then they add this star coin, which granted can be easily cheesed in multiplayer or with a propeller, but if you properly interact with the puzzle, it's way more rewarding to figure this one out. Additionally, in the sand world, there's another favorite secret of mine. This one could easily be seen as bullshit, because why would you just kill yourself? But this is such a unique secret that speaks to me so much. There's even still a challenge to it after discovering the secret, which just shows how much effort was put into parts of this game. So I was pretty impressed with some of the levels. They had some really cool ideas, and the execution is still really solid. Like, this is Nintendo. They're obviously fantastic at designing platformers, but my god, is this game lazy in so many sections. Firstly, we gotta talk about the bosses. This is the most disappointing aspect of this game, mostly because the build up to these bosses are executed very well. The tower levels can have some phenomenal vertical level design. Even though I hated this level as a kid, and still sort of do today, the World 3 tower creates a very tense level by constantly adding to the madness of this rising platform. Then after just escaping death for like 30 times, you just absolutely annihilate whatever Koopaling is the boss. This is because their attack patterns are pretty much all the same. You can go into these fights with the exact same strategy. All you have to do is either wait for one of their attacks or just go straight for their head. Then rinse and repeat 2 more times and it's done. Now for each castle boss, I think it's supposed to be the hard version of the boss, but you can still adopt the same strategy and easily beat all the Koopalings. Only one I struggled on was Wendy, because each castle will add a stage gimmick that would usually have close to no effect on the OP strategy, except for this one. Putting water in this fight makes it impossible to cheese, but it also makes this fight super frustrating, because dodging the rings when the water is rising or sinking is pretty inconsistent. So on top of having the worst boss fights ever, there are so many boring or terrible levels in this game. Like, they copied a lot of ideas from the DS game, and they chose some mechanics that were absolutely trash. Like the giant purple fish level, that did not need to come back. Then there's other great ideas such as the slowest auto-scroller in existence, but this time you can move the light. Yay! This one's really gimmicky, and also it's just an awfully frustrating level. The sandstorm level tests my patience so much, and the entirety of World 4 is a nightmare. I truly think my hatred of water levels comes from this world, because the pace of the game is halted by how slow this world is. Now, there's still quite a few nitpicks I have with this game, but I'm not going to go over every detail because as a whole, I feel like I enjoyed myself. The gameplay is about as basic as it gets, but the level design was able to capture me for a good chunk of this game. The problem comes when you get a couple of bad levels in a row. I took a huge break from playing this game because even though I was enjoying myself with the moment-to-moment gameplay, I took a step back and couldn't really justify to myself why I'd want to keep coming back to the game. This game has nothing that differentiates it, nothing that pushes it beyond a lazy sequel. This game really has no identity to it at all. And in a way, it makes sense why I couldn't remember if I loved or hated the game, because I just don't really feel one way or the other. I think overall this is a decent platformer, but when you've played a variety of unique and challenging platformers since this game has come out, it's hard to remember this as anything more than just another new Super Mario Bros. Game. Now, I saved LEGO Star Wars for last. because this was one of the first games I remember playing, as the PS2 was my first gaming console. The rest of the games I played early on were pretty simple. I mostly played multiplayer games such as Buzz, arcade collections, and SingStar. It wasn't until LEGO Star Wars when I realized how big a video game could be. The fact that this game went through 3 movies was mind-blowing to me. So as a kid, this game definitely felt bigger than it was. But I was really curious to see how this game held up, because I recently played through the entirety of the Skywalker saga, and in that game it completely changes the level design of the original. So it'll be interesting to see which one I prefer nowadays. The first thing I noticed with this game is how fast-paced it is. It completely zooms through the story, but there's a certain charm to this style of storytelling. I love the older LEGO games where it's just grunts and nothing is taken too seriously. As a kid, I had absolutely no idea what was happening. I think I'd seen the movies but couldn't really remember anything about the plot, more just who the characters were. So this time around I had a bit more of a clue what was happening. In saying that, I don't think I've seen the original movies since I was a kid, so my knowledge of Star Wars is built from YouTube videos or friends talking about the movies. But this game doesn't really require your attention, as the main focus here is going through these linear levels using different abilities to move past obstacles and solving a few optional puzzles along the way. I feel like a lot of the challenge in this game comes from exploring to find the right area to use your ability. Like, I wouldn't say the puzzles here are challenging, rather just difficult to find. But my god, was I addicted to finding these, cause the sounds of collectibles are just pure dopamine. Just listen to the crunchiness of getting a mini kit. Or the magical sounds of collecting studs. So one thing that surprised me was how many mini kits were hidden in the story mode levels. I was pretty certain that most of the mini kits were locked behind doors or abilities you hadn't unlocked yet, and whilst that's still the case, there's a lot that only require fully exploring the levels, which I somewhat appreciate, at least in the early game, but I am not a fan of this needless backtracking. I know this is a staple of most LEGO games, where you can't unlock all the mini kits because you need other characters. Personally, I'm never a fan of backtracking. I want to be able to 100% a level on the first playthrough, because now it makes collecting the mini kits in story mode playthroughs kind of pointless. I know for a fact I'm not going to get 100%, so I'm basically watching this ship get half built every time. So there's really no incentive to collect these other than the noise it makes, which I can't lie had me hooked at the start of the game, but eventually the only collectible I was going for were the coins. And thankfully the shop gives you good reason to collect these, as there's so many goofy add-ons that allow you to personalize the game. But there's also some really useful things to purchase, and you can unlock a lot of interesting characters, like everyone's favorite, Gonk Droid. Before, I said the difficulty comes from exploring the levels, but I lied. The difficulty also comes from the stupid combat in this game. My god, was this pointless. The optimal strat is to just spam attack to get past all the lasers. But in doing this, it makes the combat feel so slow and boring. I tended to either ground pound or just jump attack, but this just causes you to die a lot. Some enemies do challenge the default attack or require multiple hits, but it doesn't really spice up the gameplay. And there is way too much of this gameplay. If you have someone with a gun in your party, abuse the fuck out of that, because that is the fastest way to get through combat. On top of the normal mission structures, there's a lot of variety in here. Sometimes it's refreshing and offers a great challenge, but most of the time it sucks. Any mission that involves shooting from a ship will give you no health and an abundance of lasers coming right at you. These missions are really just about brute forcing your way through the level and hoping you don't get hit. Like in this section, what is even happening? It's way too hard to comprehend everything, so I just have to randomly move around and hope. Also in this section, sometimes you can't shoot the buttons because the screen won't let you move close enough. There's just so many little frustrating things about all these random mix-ups. Overall, this is a game that has a lot of questionable design choices, and the variety, whilst keeping the game interesting, also leads to some pretty lackluster gameplay. I still enjoy the level design and puzzle solving aspect of this game, and I assume free play would appeal a lot more to me because of this. but this is a game I prefer not to go over again, and ultimately I'd have to say the new Skywalker Saga game is a bit better. If you want to see me talk about the game in more detail, you can click on the video in the corner, but I still rate this game overall. It's fun, but if you want to play a better LEGO Star Wars game, play one of these. So, this was a fun trip down memory lane. Seeing these games nowadays and the comparisons I made to my childhood experience is really interesting to me. I think it's a common theme that usually these games won't hold up to what I thought as a kid, but I'm also able to get a lot more out of them in certain ways. I was especially surprised with how much content the Simpsons Hit and Run had. I genuinely might go back to complete this one, because the additional content was probably my favourite part of the game. As for the other two, I think it's pretty clear I'm done with these games. So if you like this idea, chuck us a like and also comment which games you have a deep nostalgic connection to. I might do a part 2 for this and maybe use some of the games you guys have commented, as long as we share that in common. Anyways, thanks for watching, peace out.